So we're going to cover a few things today. We're going to talk ultimately about a technique that we use in efficient exercise called a time static contraction. We're going to give a mild history of statics, teach people how to use statics in a way that doesn't require our specialized equipment. And then if there's anything I've learned from the internet, it's that if you want to get a lot of page views, put a really muscular guy doing something that's second to a scantily clad woman. So we'll get Keith on the ARX to demonstrate some of what I'm talking about here as far as technique is concerned. So first, static contractions. This is sometimes referred to as isometric training, which is literally without motion. It's been used, how far back do you want to go? Sometimes it's self-resistance, one arm against another, one limb against another, pushing against an immovable object. Legendary strongman Eugene Sandow used isometrics, or in his own language, kind of talked to that because you had to translate everything from German that he wrote. Into the era of the early 20th century, Muscle Beach, Charles Atlas, the old ads about the skinny guy getting sand kicked in his face, and Atlas was funny because he said, "I built all of my muscle with this dynamic tension system, but I went to the gym 3 times a week to test that strength." So, you know. And then later, Bob Hoffman, the Olympic squads, middle of the 20th century, using isometrics. Unfortunately, with Hoffman, these get written off because of steroid use in his athletes. Further later, Bruce Lee. And then in the past 20 years, we get to an article written by John Little that talks about this graded static contraction, a series of escalating subjective percentages leading up to a maximum exertion as a means of warming up, getting the athlete or the trainee ready for a maximum work output, and it also kept them from jerking or jabbing at the immovable object so that it was possibly safer on the joints compared to just winding up and going. So what about statics makes them persist so long? Because very few people ever stick with them for very long. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one is that for the longest time you couldn't grade what you were doing. There's a famous photo of Bruce Lee standing there, and he's standing on a block that has chains hooked up to it, and he has a down. He's doing a static bicep curl. He just sort of went all out and trusted that your all out was getting stronger and stronger over time. So as we move through these exercise science periods of time, we get more and more unique and specialized way to measure force output in muscle tissue, and you have evidence for the isometrics and be able to track the isometrics. I'll give you an example of what we're talking about here. Most trainees cannot maximally exert themselves to the fullest extent of what their muscle tissue allows, especially untrained trainees and even advanced trainees. There's still a distance between all of their muscles firing and what they're capable of voluntarily firing. And we measure this in the exercise physiology labs with a technique called twitch interpolation. So what they do is they hook a line up to the nerve root and they apply a supramaximal electrical current to stimulate this main nerve that innervates the entirety of a muscle group. Typically it's the quadriceps. And so what you see is you'll tell a trainee to maximally contract, and then they hit the switch and you see an increase in this electrical activity, which indicates that you're getting much more muscle activity. You're actually recruiting motor units that weren't working before, that weren't being called into action. So as I show here, here's your voluntary max, here's your true max. Person's exerting. They hit the switch and you close that gap. And this is adapted from a review of twitch interpolation by Shield and Zhao in 2004. And so why I'm bringing this up is because using this technique, Babao et al. In 2001 showed that a static or an isometric contraction was able to recruit 95% of the available muscle capacity compared to only, say, 89% for eccentrics, and concentrics got pretty close to about 88%. So understanding that as a technique you can get at all of, or almost all of, the available muscle fibers, it would behoove you to use it with clients. Now, if you don't have an ARX type piece or some sort of feedback mechanism that uses force cells, powerlifters have used variations of this for years, typically referred to as overcoming isometrics or yielding isometrics, where they would attempt to lift a bar against a power rack that was locked into place, at a specific point. In their case, they often use the sticking point, coming just off the chest on a bench press, sort of bottom half deadlifts where it transitions into the lockout. You may also use what's called a yielding isometric. Powerlifters who do this as walkouts. They might get into a squat. They might get in a squat rack of weight they can't possibly lift, but they'll walk out and hold it. And this fires up the nervous system. This gets some of those motor units firing and gets them ready to push harder. I use that technique with some of my older clients to have their bones see a load for osteoporosis reasons in a very safe fashion because they can't drop the weight. It's set in such a way that they sustain it, but they don't have to lift it or be fearful of dropping it. So those are two ways you can use it if you don't have our specialized equipment. And it works pretty well if you use a super maximal isometric before a work set. You might be surprised with the results of working. But I'm going to show you how we do the graded static on the ARX equipment. So Keith, come on over here. So go ahead and sign in for me. So we're adapting what John Little reported and then I heard from Ken Hutchins, which was we do 3 stages of the contraction, which is we're going to put a person in a position of maximum muscular torque, force output at the deltoid, which is about just below 90 degrees, minimizes any risk of impinging the tissues. So I'll come around this side. And I'm going to instruct Keith here to smoothly, go ahead and scoot back for me, we're going to use these handles, to smoothly, looking at you here, yeah, that's a pretty good position for you, to smoothly start with a subjective 50% maximum effort. And it's sustained, so you're going to have me saying, keep the fat needle with the skinny needle. So it's a smooth, sustained contraction. After 15 seconds, I'm going to have Keith build smoothly to 75%. This is, again, subjective. It's more, it's not max. It should still feel comfortable, but a good tension. And then the final 30 seconds are a gradual ramping, not a jamming, up to 100% sustainable maximum contraction. And if we do it right, the last 10 seconds, you're going to feel your subjective effort going through the roof as that fat needle continues to fall away from the skinny needle in spite of your best effort. Makes sense? So,
makes sense.
Keith has already worked out. This will be good. He should. He's not going to embarrass anybody with his beastly strength on this now that he's already taxed the shoulders. So, when I say go, 50% subjective effort, just gradually ramp up to that. And 3, 2, 1. Start to smoothly build, just feeling that. You're going to keep the fat needle at the skinny needle. Remember, this is a warm-in. It's fairly arbitrary. Keep that fat needle at the skinny needle. It's not necessary to do a true 50%. It's just less than.
So you preset it.
Okay. Yeah, no. Now go ahead and ramp up to 75% of what you think you can do, just feeling it out. Now the fun is starting to begin, keeping the fat needle at the skinny needle. I want you to keep your jaw open and let the breathing happen so you're not performing a Valsalva here. That helps to reduce the jamming. Okay? Now gradually ramp up to what you think you can max out at. Start to build power. There you go. Start to breathe. Steady. Keep that fat needle with the skinny needle here. Keep that fat needle with the skinny needle. Try. Now think a little faster on that. Breathe through it. Start to pant. Here we go. It'll go. There you go. 15 more seconds. Keep, stay with it. Effort keeps going. Effort keeps going. Breathing. Breathing. 10 seconds left, Keith. Stay with it. Breathing. Breathing. 5 more seconds. Going. 4, 3. Stay with it, buddy. 2, 1, and back up. There we go. So, keep the beat red, definitely working hard. Did it feel like your deltoids are about to tear off the shoulder at the end there?
I was cussing pretty hard.
So, something like that. This works really well, not only from a perspective of you can take a strong guy and make them feel like they've worked really hard, but if you're going to teach people to move through a full range of motion on the ARX, the problem and the potential liability is that they want to get underneath, they want to jam into the thing, because they see an advanced athlete like Keith, who knows where his body is in space and knows his limits, has good proprioception. They see that and they go, oh, I just push as hard as I can. But they'll be locking out the joint, they'll be twisting in place, and there's potential orthopedic problems that will arise from that. If you start with something like the static and teach them the graded effort, the graded steady effort, and then introduce movement, you can teach them to work hard first, and then when you include the motion, they've already mastered the working hard part. And so one of the things that comes out of motor learning is part practice. Telling a person who's never worked so hard in their life to push as hard as you can and keep your form tight while you do that is a whole lot to juggle. So you break it down, you start with push hard, push control, and then add movement. And so that's how we would do it here with the ARX in a time static contraction.